to correct the issue with the condition and location of the condensers providing cooling for the first floor of that school. That is a much bigger project. Plus, if you're going to address that, you're also going to include the unit ventilators that are inside the school. But even just the condensers outside with the line sets, I can't speak to why when the school was built, or it wasn't when it was built, at some point they added air conditioning, why they located the condensers where they did. I mean, they brought them together inside a fenced enclosure, and they are very far. It's not the most efficient, but again, in the priority list, like when we were identifying areas that to include in the air conditioning project, it was first to identify and to address those areas that did not have air conditioning. Addressing these spaces would be, in the future as part of a different project.
But some of those units are going to be replaced this year.
As part of our ongoing maintenance, we will replace those condensers.
Quite a few of them, it sounds like.
Again, as condensers fail throughout the district, and I have to tell you, the fact that we're air conditioning, like, we continue to add classrooms, air conditioning, especially with the, and we're kind of committed at this point with the system that we have. When you go back to the 1998 referendum, they designed our cooling system district-wide as, for the most part, split systems. They didn't decide to, invest in having a cooled system or having a chiller. We have split systems where you have a condenser outside each one of our classrooms, which is, again, not the most efficient. It's very cost affordable, but that's, and we're continuing down that path. But that is they're going to be an ongoing maintenance issue for the district. I mean, it's going to consume a lot of work.
But as they upgrade them, if they're existing especially, they do qualify for rebates from the state if we do them in kind. So this is part of a broader conversation of how we're going to finance it going forward, because we do have code requirements that we have to meet at the same time as we are updating. And if we can get money back from it at the same time, then, when you're doing a fresh upgrade to a room that doesn't have air conditioning, fortunately, you don't always have those advantages. So it's going to have to be part of a broader conversation at some point as we look at our long-range facilities plan.
Can I ask, the air conditioning project is taking into consideration all the hallways as well, or is it just classrooms?
Classrooms. Does not consider hallways.
So what is the, I don't know the details, but having read about the condensation issue of an un-air conditioned hallway in a hot day with air conditioned rooms and the development of, moisture, how is that being addressed? Or Adam, maybe you can tell me I'm crazy.
Go ahead.
So newer systems, part of the reason that they're able to dehumidify is that in conjunction with upgrading, and we're not there yet, upgrading the unit vents in the classrooms, usually run the boilers year round. And what happens is when you cool the room, and this is going to seem crazy, but as you put higher efficiency boilers in, it's actually cheaper for you to run the boilers year round than to have like heating element in the individual unit to dehumidify the air as you're blowing cold air over it. So follow the logic here, okay? We got the air going in, It's going through the coil. Coil cools it to around 55 degrees. That's where you cut out all the humidity in the air. Anything below 55 degrees, if you're blowing it out, close to 0% humidity. But then when you blow it out, you got to warm it back up a little bit so that you're not freezing the room, because in these systems in schools, the code requires you to run the air consistently.
Right?
Yeah, it can't stop. I know you know some of this, but for everybody else, it's something that we deal with because people are either freezing or they're boiling hot. There's no one side or the other, but all they know is the fan is constantly going. So that is part of how it deals with it within the classroom. Now, it's important to keep in mind that I'm not gonna get too deep into this. A typical classroom is usually sized for what a normal size house is. So what you'd be putting in your house is what you're putting in each one of your classrooms. From a cooling side, if it's anywhere from 3 to 5 tons usually. So if you have a classroom full of, I think, 20 students, and you have 20 students, you have 300 BTUs per student. You know, you run the calculations based on that. You're essentially putting anywhere from a 3 to a 5 ton unit, which is what you'd normally put in an entire house. So these systems are, when you look at it in that perspective, 10 to 13,000. You could be doing that in your house, and it's somewhat similarly priced. So it's, and on top of that, doing one in every single classroom, it gets extremely expensive to run, which is why then you need controls so that you can make it run efficiently. So what we're doing now and doing it piecemeal is possible, but the overarching vision has to stay consistent, which kind of speaks to Brian's point where, you know, the first floor is split systems. That's why they're doing the second floor split systems, because eventually it's all going to have to tie into a overall building system. So you can't mix and match it too much, because you're going to have to now size the boilers a certain way, and then it's going to have to run the entire system in a certain way. So I hope that answers a couple of questions.
And Old Mill runs like that. It
Yeah.
has the dehumidification system. We run the boilers in the summer. And I think the other point is, because of the transition students moving in and out and doors being open, we cool the hallways. You don't need to actually have to have registers in there, but there isn't that much of a temperature difference, except for on maybe extreme days when they have outside doors open, that the temperature difference between classrooms and the hallway is not that drastic. Not that we've experienced.
So to your point, Adam, is that another reason to prioritize boilers in the buildings, because they'll help offset the $17 million we just spent on air
No,
conditioning?
you have to prioritize them anyway, because they're all end of life.
But
and
it's
that's
another
just
but
something.
it's another good reason to do it,
Absolutely.
right? Okay, that's what I'm getting at.
I mean, we're able to do them in a way where we can get money back from the state. If we do it through some way, we can either get a grant or some sort of offsetting funding. That makes it even more attractive. And on top of that, the boilers that you have in the schools are anywhere from 75 to 80% efficient. The ones you have going in now are 98% efficient when they're running during the summer, which is, I mean, it almost costs nothing to run them. It's almost the same as running a hot water heater in your house.
How much does it affect your lifespan?
You get about 20 to 25 years, but they're also more compact. They're more,
Like a hot
It's
water
the-
tank in your house kind of thing, more efficient.
well, it's more efficient, but it's scalable. That's the word I'm looking for. So if you have one go down, you don't have to come in, pull it out, and, you know, there's boilers, they literally build them in the room. You know, these are small enough that you can fit them through the door. If you have one go down and it's a major issue, looking down the road, you can just take it out and put a new one in. I mean, you put an addition on a building. You don't have to build a whole new boiler system. You just run the piping in there and you tack on another boiler on the end. You know, fingers crossed it was designed for that, but that's something that, you know, you talk about now.
Thank you.
So this will be on the agenda for next week? Okay. Wall High School, stadium field condition, if we recall last year, the operations department was looking to do not a regrading, but like a top dressing with soil and seeding. There's a little bit of history. They held off on the pre-emergent because they had just seeded. That ended up backfiring with regard to, you know, perhaps the quality of the topsoil that was brought in, because we had a considerable amount of crabgrass that grew as a combination of the topsoil and not applying the pre-emergent. So we're looking to better address that this year with the plan, the maintenance plan for the field. However, the other combining factor is the drainage of the field on both sidelines, where it holds water each year. A combination of holding water, players standing on the sideline, it gets worse throughout the season. So we're in the midst of trying to identify a plan to address that. You know, I know there's been discussions of, you know, bigger projects, but in order to, you know, prepare the field for the seasons in September, and the fact that we're having a mild winter at this point, we're looking to put in some drainage, whether we do it in-house. We're having conversation with the municipality for what assistance they could provide. The idea of putting in somewhat like a French drain along the perimeter, or putting in perforated pipe with some inlets to collect the water that runs off and try to bring it to the back of the property, which is where it naturally grades to. The township is helping us out there. We're gonna bring in some survey equipment and help us shoot some grades so that we get a better idea of the grades that are out there and what we're dealing with. But that's something that the operations department is currently working on, but there's going to be a cost associated with that. You know, I don't have a handle on at this time, but I didn't know if there was any comments or conversation anybody wanted to have. Yes.
Get somebody that understands where you plant grass seed, you can't. Please.
Well, and in order to address that, because of the short time frame between when work gets done and you know, the start of the season, is we would probably be looking to put in sod, but that would be dependent on the amount of disturbance in trying to put in drainage. But we would look to run sod down each side. The other area that we're looking to address, it's been raised as a concern from the athletic department, is the practice field, because of the grading of the practice field, which is in pretty poor shape. That's something that is also currently being looked at. It definitely needs to have either some regrading or dressing on it, just to make a uniform playing field. How to move forward with regard to you know, the surface will be dependent on cost and timing. So there would be more to follow with regard to that, but we're going to be moving ahead with drainage on each sides of the varsity field
Brian,
at this time.
do you anticipate it being done before graduation?
Yes. The goal would be that graduation would not be disturbed. And if you recall, last year, graduation, the field looked great. And the work was done prior to graduation, and the field looked great at graduation, and then the summer came. Yes, it went downhill, and we hope not to see that again. Oh, but the field was in great condition for graduation, because it was all set up for it. Okay. The next two items on the agenda, not to go through the facility assessment report, or actually go through the list included in the long-range facility plan, but it's for the board to discuss how we want to move forward in identifying how we're going to look to address it. You know, especially those items in the long-range facility plan. We talked about the different types of funding sources, but sitting down and being able to identify and start categorizing these projects or these items that are on the plan into different categories with regard to funding and as far as prioritizing. So I'm not sure we want to continue with that as committee of the whole. I know we've discussed as a committee structure. It's a big item to tackle as a committee of the whole.
We are going to tackle that as the committee structure, that particular item, where we can sit down and really dissect it.
Okay.
And spend quite a bit of time so everybody doesn't have to sit there and do it.
Okay, now would be through the finance facility.
Finance facilities, yes.
Okay,
So that would be a subcommittee, so to speak?
Yep.
A subcommittee of this committee?
That
So
you're
to speak.
chairman of.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just clarifying that.
Yes.
On the microphone.
Not to Mr. Chair, not to
Yes.
interfere with the flow of the agenda, but I like that question because, you know, we have stated publicly that we would be operating as a committee of a whole, and at some point later, you're going to clarify about the committee structure and what we're looking at going forward.
Well, we're
Right.
still gonna operate as a committee of the whole, but what we've done in the past, even as a committee of the whole, we do have people allocated for different committees in case something unusual pops up or something that takes a little more time.
Okay.
And certainly having the amount of stuff that you have to read and go through and having maybe maybe some detailed presentations. In light of everything else that's going on, it might be better to do that and then bring it, a more cleaned up version to the full board, and then to the public. So that way you're not wasting a lot of time, and you can really formulate good questions by analyzing it a little longer and deeper. So we're not taking anything away from anybody. We're just giving it a little more time to dive in and develop deeper questions and really analyze it and clean it up.
Yeah, I agree. This is gonna be tedious.
Yeah.
And there's gonna need to be some people that are committed to getting this done, because it's gonna be a grind, but I think we'll all end up better by doing it that way. So, thank you.
Just as a note too, I mean, you know, when we have some of these committees for curriculum and different things like that, and, you know, I mean, we can also, you know, get together as committees in certain, you know, regards, and like impromptu, like meetings and stuff like that, and we don't have to necessarily have a set agenda, say every Tuesday at 4:30, we're gonna meet here, different things like that. Especially as, you know, different things pop up, during the season, you know, in the course of the year. So I think it's nice to operate kind of as a hybrid.
Okay. Last item is the, with regard to the budget attached, you have a budget calendar. I revised it with regard to the information that came in for the download of the software from the state. It was available January 27th. You know, departments are continuing to work on the budgets. I was looking for information to go to the board on an electronic basis initially, rather than printing a lot of documents and then replacing or updating pages. But I would ask for input from the board, or perhaps taking certain portions of it, because like the capital is going to be in conjunction with the F&F committee with regard to, again, that's going to be one of the funding sources, which items from the long-range facility plan will go into the capital portion of the budget. The health benefits, which is almost an entity by itself, can be provided to the board, or information more globally with regard to revenues, expenditures, rather than just giving you 327 pages of budget details and say, hey, let's go, you know, review it on your own, and then we could sit there and go through them piecemeal as, or line by line, where if we take it in chunks with regard to categories of the budget and provide it to the board, so that there could be, you know, reviewing it in a component section as opposed to a 327-page binder. You know, our first workshop meeting is going to be scheduled for the 25th, which next week is only a business meeting, so the first workshop meeting would be the 25th. So again, you know, do we going to want 327 pages at that point, or do we want portions of the budget for that period of time? And then as information is available or is provided, or based on discussion of the board, it would be provided to the board. And the other question I would have, as far as electronic versions to paper copies.
Brian, can I ask, as Ken has forewarned us many times about this process and what a bear it's going to be, and providing us such enthusiasm to move into it, what are the pillars of the budget that can be, you know, built without a lot of effort to bake into a budget that is, you know, 60% or 80%, because we have contracts and we have certain things that are, you know, like, what are the easy things that we can do, if there are any, or what are the hard things that we want to compartmentalize? 327 pages to me sounds like, you know, I'd rather jump off a bridge somewhere. But what are your recommendations for compartmentalizing, I guess I would ask?
Well, I think rather than looking at the actual details, which the board's going to have the ability to do, and as you see fit, you can go through line item and question any item that's in there. But like using the capital projects as an example, you know, that doesn't require 327 pages. You don't need to itemize. That'll be a discussion on, in conjunction with the long-range facility plan. The other part of it is what new programs are, are being introduced, or what existing programs are requiring additional resources as part of this budget. You know, because as we introduce programs and we're moving into second and third year of those programs, they necessitate additional resources, you know, and a lot of those resources will be identified in the supply account for that school. Like in the high school, instructional supply account would be an example where you may be looking at, you know, 2 pages of line items, but really what you want to know is like, what is in there that's new, what is in there that has changed from the prior year, or everything should be justified based on what has been provided by the building administrator. But I think it's really like the big picture items as far as programs, new staff, changes in staff, how is enrollment impacting, you know, this budget with regard to staffing, and what are the initiatives that we're looking to fund. You know, both, you know, academically as well as maintenance as well as capital.
And I know you've communicated with everybody in the district that has a say. What is the how do you present it to, say, a building principal to build their budget for the next year? Is it, you know, justify from 0 up, or is it justify the plus 2% that you're asking for?
No, it is justified from 0 up. That's what they are charged with. Now, what I don't want to be misleading is so that there's not the tedious work of re-entering all the information. We provide them their budget from the prior year. So the instructional supply account, which 90% of it will remain the same. You know, they're provided it, but what they're required to do when they go through it, you know, one thing that's evident in the details is the date that we transmit the budget from electronically we roll it over from the prior year, we bring it into the new budget projection, it has that date. So we'll do that in December. So as a check to anyone who's reviewing their budget, they need to review each line item and change the date. That means they've reviewed that line item, they've reviewed the price, they've made an edit to the price, and by changing the date signifies that that is current, not just a rollover from the prior year. So the base is that it's 0 budgeting, but in practicality, you know, unless you're changing the program, there's certain instructional supplies that teachers need every year. There's a certain amount of funds that we're going to budget for maintenance of Central School or Allenwood School every year, just for the routine, changing filters, changing lights. So that's not going to change significantly unless we're saying, hey, we're going to paint West Belmar. So that's why there's 40,000. That's why there's a change in this account. Those are the items that need to be broken out separately and I think discussed in more detail with the board.
Just so I have an idea of what's going to be hitting my inbox on the 14th, are we going to see the budget detail report or the budget summary report with just the account line items? In other words, are we going to see the underlying, like, step 1 systems 3,000 lines that get entered in there?
We can, I can provide either one with the caveat, though, that if we want to go to the budget details report with that level of detail, there may be considerable changes as we go, more so going through the process than if it was just the summary line items. Because there would be changes, but it would be the dollar amount, not necessarily the details going through.
Okay, so the intent is then to send the summary report on Friday, not the detail report. If we need additional details, that can be provided for
Absolutely.
each individual account?
Yes.
Okay.
And then prior to the actual budget workshop meeting, and again, part of the question is, do we want to work on this electronically, or do we want paper copies, you know, of the budgets?
Why don't you just ask like individual preferences? I mean, I don't know. Ken likes paper. I don't know if you like electronics. I mean,
Is this a dating service?
do you like paper?
I think,
I was kind of hoping to
Mr.
get a
Chair.
consensus and guilt the rest of them into whatever.
Hi, I'm
everyone else
Ken,
is
and I
doing.
like paper.
Well,
Mr.
I
Chair,
personally- Yes.
with regards to that, one of the things that I know has been a frustration for me and for other board members is it is difficult to read some of this stuff because of the limitations with this, okay? I can't go like this with my screen. I know how to explode it with changing the image size, but it's still limited. So, you know, whatever way we go, guys, it's got to be big enough for the 50-plus over crowd to look.
Andy,
it's
Andy likes
too-
paper too.
I was gonna say, no, I was gonna say, just based on my experience with this, I think having it in paper is much easier to look at, because it's easier to make notes
don't care. I
and
just need to
go
be able to
through,
see
because
it.
on a computer, I mean, I print some things out because again, limitations, sometimes it's just easier to flip through, and I think certainly with the budget, it's much easier to do it in paper, even though it unfortunately.
So for the 14th, though, we can have like summary with the electronic, and then for the 21st, I'll have hard copies for,
Yeah,
All the board.
yeah, I think that's
now, with
fine
the
for the summer.
21st being the Friday prior to the budget workshop on Tuesday, that's sufficient for the board? And again, it's the first of a number of workshops that we will have an opportunity to discuss it. And if it's also, components of it are gonna be discussed in the FNF committee, or FNF subcommittee, in conjunction with the, long-range facility plan.
So it's the 20,
The first budget workshop is the 25th,
yeah, the 25th. So it would go home on what day? 24th,
21st,
okay. That's
which is the
Friday.
Friday before.
Mr. Chair, could I
Yes.
ask a question related to budget overall, not just this planning phase? So the amount of money is budgeted, you know, teachers start, and principals and the others in the district start spending it after July 1st. So how long do they have to work with the fund that's there? I know there are certain areas, I remember, with regards to being able to have that flexibility to use it later in the year, but is there a point at which you tell the entire district you're done, you know, and how does that
We actually,
impact
they're able to, we don't pay any bills till after July, but the district actually starts spending the money prior to July 1st, because what we do is we'll open up the budget in early June, and that will allow the buildings to start entering requisitions against next year's budget before the end of the school year, especially when teaching staff and the 10-month staff is there. So we open it up early, and then they have, for the most part, through the year. We'll close out accounts typically starting in April, shutting down accounts or access to accounts by certain departments. But there are specific departments that are basically run through the year, like the operations department. We don't limit their access because they're working right through June, as well as technology and special services tends to be another one. The schools themselves with instructional supplies, the thought is, as you start getting into the second semester, January, December, you're already placing your orders for your needs for the remainder of the school year. You don't really need access to those accounts, in May and June, because the year is basically over. So, if that answers your question. Okay?
Can I ask
So I
some
have on the agenda.
questions,
anything else?
FNF, that are kind of old business, FNF related? That's the next, great, good segue. Brian, we had a presentation from the auditor a couple weeks back, 4 recommendations to be completed by January 31st, 2020. Can you give us an update on those?
Yeah, they're completed. As far as the corrective action plan,
Right.
they're completed with regard to what action is going to be taken, some of it, the results of which can't be
Understood.
realized till
Okay,
sometime in the
fair enough.
future.
I had requested a report from the auditor of the full roster of purchase orders that he reviewed over, in his summary. Was that ever provided, or did I miss that?
Yeah, that'll be in the, this Friday's packet.
Okay,
It was provided.
thank you.
That was provided last week, should have went in last Friday's packet, that was on me.
It was?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize for missing it.
No, that was on me, it didn't go in the Friday packet,
Gotcha,
but the auditor had
and I
provided.
apologize for not missing it. In terms of the budget, as we sit here as an F&F committee, and maybe this is not doable, but is it possible to get a consolidated budget report that shows prior year, current budget, year-to-date, and the variance, just to see kind of how we're tracking revenues to expenses through the year? Do we get that and I'm not seeing it? Like a consolidated version? I don't need to see every line item down to pencils and pens, but, you know, salaries, instructional expenses, just to kind of, so we're not surprised in May
Compared
that
to-
we're under revenue or we're under or over expenses?
To include last year's?
A year over year? You know, this year and last year? So we can see just how we're tracking? Has that ever been done or ever been asked for?
Well,
And I know to do it monthly is impossible. I'm not asking, but more like a quarterly type of report?
yeah, we can provide that. And as,
And we can talk about what it would look like if you know, and for next, you know, for going forward, I'm not saying for next meeting. Just to think about, just something that
Well-
to me, it would be helpful just to know that we're trailing, you know, to the budget appropriately.
the budget projection module actually does a comparison to, you know, year-to-date with the actual expenditures from the prior 5 years. So that'll become evident in the budget projection module, which is part of the budget process. You know, there's some limitations with regard to that as far as when we update, but I can work on a report that includes prior year expenditures to, budget to expenditures and current year budget to expenditures.
If we could just talk about it and see if it's
Okay.
doable in some capacity.
You got it?
The PTO nonprofit status, one of the schools had struggled with that. Is there an update on that, or if it was discussed, I don't recall hearing, did that ever get worked out, Ms. Dyer?
That's the primary school, and Carol Duffy has been working with the state PTO organization and one of the parents in the school to try to bring that to fruition. But they still don't have a valid PTO at that building.
Do we have, do we have a goal to have it done by next fiscal year, or kind of where we stand with that? Or what's the holdup, I'm wondering?
The holdup is them doing the paperwork, not the school district, but the parents.
Volunteers.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right. The building tours, Brian, that some of the board members have gone on, how do we go and set those up? Just call you?
Yes.
Okay. And then, my last question would be trailers. What's the status? I missed the last meeting, so I apologize. What's the status of where we stand with the trailers being, you know, the bid for removal?
We take bids tomorrow.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll be in a position where the board will be able to make a recommendation next week at the business meeting.
Thank you.
Any other old business?
Yeah, I have old business. I guess it comes under old business. I don't know where else to put it, so I'll put it under old business. The board approved a calendar for the 2021 school year, and during that discussion of the calendar with the WTEA, we also had some discussion with regard to the current year calendar, 1920, and what consideration could be given if we continue to have a mild winter and don't have a need for the 3 built-in emergency closing days. So there was a suggestion made by the WTEA. The board has had some time to discuss that in executive session because it falls under negotiation, so it is an executive session conversation. And what I am suggesting to the board, what I'm recommending, is that if we continue to have this mild winter, and we know by March 13th that we're not going to need the 3 snow days, as they're commonly referred to, but they're emergency days. If we don't need those 3 emergency days, I would recommend to the board that at your March 17th business meeting, you approve a revised calendar for the current year that would add a day off to the April break. And that day that I would recommend would be in the week following Easter, where we're currently off on what we're referring to as Easter Monday, I would add Easter Tuesday, for want of a better description, and that would help out our vocational students who this year have a different spring break at the Voc School than they do at Wall High School. And it would extend that break by 1 day. Now, the reason why I want to bring this to the board tonight and talk about it is I don't feel comfortable waiting until March 17th to let the parents in the district know that that's a possibility. I think we need to let parents know that that's a possibility so that they could make necessary arrangements for childcare if they have young children, et cetera. So, you know, with the board's blessing, I would put out an email to the parents tomorrow, letting them know that that is in the works. And again, should we not have used those 3 days by March 13th, I would recommend to the board that you approve a revised calendar on March 17th. So is there any discussion on that, or you don't need a motion tonight, I just, you know, kind of a sense of the board.
I think I'm
You
in
support
agreement with that.
Correct, I think the date is April 14th, thanks for looking that up. Yeah, the extra day that would be added would be the 14th. Okay, thank you.
Ralph, I have a couple other things. I'm sorry. I went through all my notes and have some questions to follow up on. Ms. Dyer, when I first joined the board back in September, there was a presentation on district goals, and there was, my notes say that we would have a mid-year report at some point. Do we have any type of, did I misread that or miswrite that? Do we have any update on our mid-year goals?
No, but I can give you one.
No, I don't need it now. I'm just wondering if there was going to be something down the road.
Sure. We don't normally, I mean, it varies from year to year.
Okay,
In the
that's fine.
first year of the strategic plan, we did do a formal presentation in the middle of the year as to where we were with the strategic plan. Then we did updates on an annual basis. But I'll put something in the packet this week, and then if you have questions, we can follow up with a more formal presentation.
Thank you. Can I also ask for, I know the high school went through ALICE training with their students this past couple weeks or so. Can we get some kind of update on how that went? Because I think that's a wonderful program that's, you know, extremely important, and anything that can be provided back to us about that would be helpful.
Sure.
Anybody else have anything? No? Okay. Seeing none, public comment? There's no new business. Okay, still a public comment. Thank you.
Betsy Cross, I live in Wall Township. Since I'm the only person here and I've been sitting here for a number of hours, I'm just wondering if I could go over the 5 minutes. I might need 10 minutes. You went over a lot of information, and one of the comments was communication and things like that. So, Mr. Adonisio, could you let me know?
No.
Okay. That's not the way the board president should be acting, but everybody can hear that for themselves. Can you post all those purchase orders that Mr. Gorth said that Mr. Smythe has? That's going to be in your Friday packet. I think you should let everybody else see them. Stravola, I also had an issue with. Mr. Smythe gave me a pretty hard time in trying to get a copy of the actual invoice. What I have a hard time following is there's never any emails of when purchase orders go back and forth from Mr. Smythe to Mr. Romano or the new person. Is there a procedure in place to hand deliver them and not email them so that there's no tracking of when they're received? If Mr. Smythe could go over that, Mr. Adonisio, I would like to have that on the record tonight. And going over, could you give us an update on the order, on the superintendent search? Since yesterday, what's been done? The profile, things like that is going to be online. I got some executive minutes redacted today. You had some dates wrong. showing that they were returned yesterday when they weren't. I had to follow up a number of times. So Mr. Adenizio should be more on top of that. I'm a little bit concerned about this one with a settlement agreement. It said Ms. Dyer provided some background on the settlement agreement that is on this evening's agenda, settling one count for Sue Parsons' lawsuit. I mean, this just burns me up. Like, why would Ms. Dyer be giving you the update on the lawsuit? I mean, one of the main reasons we're in the lawsuit is because what happened with Ms. Dyer doing the investigation. So I'd like an answer to that tonight. And a couple of these I'm going to post up on Facebook because I really think these really have to get out there and people have to see what's going on here in the back room. One other one that's disturbing says, this is on the Central School trailers, and this is on December 3rd. It says, Mr. Gross advised the board concerning blank, 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 the Central School trailer issue. So, Mr. Adenizio, if you could give us an update on what was being redacted on December 3rd regarding the trailer issue, because we've been being told that everything, you're laughing, Mr. Gross? Is that funny? It's hysterical? Yeah. So good. So you can let everybody else know, everybody else can watch, and everybody can laugh along. But we were told we were going to be so sick of transparency with the trailer issue, and we are nowhere near we're nowhere near transparency on the trailer issue. I get more and more disgusted. December 3rd, there's a HIB case, and this one was, I sat here for this, and I couldn't understand why the board was voting against what the staff was advising. So it looks like the parents came in and they met on December 3rd, and I hope we're not going to get a lawsuit out of this. So it looks like it's going to be on your agenda again because 7 people voted that it was not a HIB, and the parents actually met with you that it was a HIB. So those are all these things were on there. Bank statements came back today. Can you have Mr. Smythe advise why we have almost $11 million sitting in the bank and we weren't getting interest on it? We have hidden bank fees. I did send these into the DOE today. I'm waiting for Exhibit A for the 5-year lease purchasing agreement. I do not have that. I have very specific requests regarding an OPR for the Central School trailers. So this denial is absolutely false because I got the same information with identical language from the DOE. So I suggest you go back and have Mr. Smythe look at this very carefully with Mr. Gross so that you do not get sued. So that is OPR number 20-079. Health insurance, your numbers you're going over tonight do not match your audit report. These are the things that are so concerning to me. Your numbers need to match. So you have money, then you transfer over money. It doesn't make any sense. Glad to see you actually have some numbers because you hadn't had numbers for years, at least 3 years. There weren't any numbers on
Ms. Cross, your
where
5 minutes is up. Thank you.
on where the numbers were.
Thank you.
Revenue. you
Anybody else
need
for
to
public comment?
Get the revenue correct.
Seeing none? Any board members have anything else?
Cost per pupil is $24,161. We really
Mr.
need
Garcia?
to get a
Nope.
handle on it.
No? Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion, so moved.
Could I have a second?
And don't delete any emails
you
or
wanna make-
text messages, Mr. Adenizio. I see there's a
Chris has a
open
comment.
request for a lot of your
Ms. Cross, your
text
time is done.
messages.
Thank you.
Ms. Cross,
So
would-
please don't delete
Ms. Cross, your time
anything.
is done.
Would you like
Thank
your
you.
question answered on the superintendent search?
Yes, I would.
Okay, very
I'd
good.
like all my questions answered,
And
all of them.
I will talk into the microphone and I will answer your
Thank
question
you.
on the superintendent search.
Can I ask you to do-
Go ahead.
Mine are,
Public comments closed. There's nobody else, I asked.
one with regard to the OPR request, they're providing a hard time with regard to providing a purchase order for vendor Stavola. I would disagree that a hard time was provided in that there was a request for the document. It would have been provided. The individual visited the office and requested a copy of the purchase order. A copy of the purchase order was provided at that time in hand. A photograph of the document was taken and the purchase order was returned to the business office, or was refused, and then indicated that that it be emailed and included as a OPRA request, which it in fact was not an OPRA request. It was a request for a document, and I thought we were being pretty transparent and responsive in actually providing the document, but the document was refused, so I do take exception to being characterized as being given a hard time with providing the document. With regard to the numbers for the health benefit account analysis or the review not matching the audit, this is a report that was provided as with regard to the expenditures of the account, and it would match the expenditures of the account. If you recall the discussion with regard to how the IBNR is factored in at the audit, when the auditors review, one, what our working capital is, but really what our IBNR is, and if they have to make adjustments in the IBNR, that affects the final audit number with regard to the expenditures on the line account. So that will be different than what was reported, which was the actual expenses of the account, not funds that were, or the line item being adjusted to put funds on the balance sheet to cover our IBNR at the year end by the auditor. Thank you.
In reference to the question on the superintendent search, following last night's meeting, we were here for quite a while, hammering out the details of the advertisement, where we're going to be advertising, different newspapers and online forums or online, I guess, services, yes. So we hammered that out. There's still some back and forth today in reference to getting the language correct and getting the profile tuned in perfectly as best we can. And I believe we're there at that point, this point in time. There's two more things that came in this afternoon that I sent over to Frank and Mike, and I believe that's the last portion of what we needed to do. We spent many hours on that. So I don't know if you think that it has to be days or something like that, but I think the hours that we spend together, whether we spend that 1 hour over 3 days or 3 hours into the twilight last night, I think it was very productive. So we expect that ad should be launched tomorrow, and then we have.
Posted online before you launch it.
So the online ads will go out tomorrow, and then we have our the advertising firm that's going to help us craft the way that the ad looks in the different papers and the actual physical, stuff that comes to your doorstep and Ken likes. And that was it.
In response to what I found to be comical. Obviously, when there are executive session minutes redacted, they are redacted for reasons that need to be kept confidential, especially attorney-client privilege, which is why they are redacted, which is why we're not going to say what it says at this point in time, which is why I found it rather comical.
It's regarding the trailers.
In addition, the board members have nothing to do with that. We don't produce them, we don't print them, we don't do anything with them. So that's out of our hands. Anybody else have anything? Nope, seeing none. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Good night, thank you.